Today's episode is about carrots and how we grow great carrots on Millsap Farm. Check it out. Hey guys, it's Curtis Millsap from Millsap Farm. I'm here to talk a little bit about carrot harvesting. We were just harvesting carrots. We got chased out of the field by a thunderstorm. So I'm here inside our earthworm greenhouse. We're talking a little bit about machinery, a little bit about different styles of harvesting, and what the considerations we have when we figure out how we're gonna harvest something and what that crop's the best way to go about harvesting that crop. And specifically, we're talking about carrots. And the reason I think that's interesting is because carrots are one of those crops that have really evolved over the years as we've gotten better at growing them, and then also have figured out better ways to harvest them. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. I've got some good footage of the undercutter being used, which is the current way we usually harvest our carrots. We undercut with a tractor, and I've got some decent footage of our tractor in action. And then we've also got some footage of us pulling those out of the ground. Carrots are one of those crops that has really changed. And really the first and biggest change is we now grow good carrots. When we got started, we weren't growing good carrots. And I think that's pretty typical. I think startup market farming, it's hard to grow good carrots. Carrots are a challenging crop from a weed control perspective. So a lot of our early carrot crops were lost to the weeds. If you don't start with a pretty clean seed bed in the first place, then it's extremely hard to get carrots weeded and keep them clean long enough for them to make big, beautiful roots. It's about a 2.5 month crop, and that means by the time you get them to maturity, if you haven't done a lot of weeding or didn't start with a pretty clean bed, you're going to have weeds that are much, much, much bigger than your carrots. Early years of farming, we've been doing this 13 years now. In our early years of farming, I definitely said these words, let's get the brush hog out and see if there's carrots under those weeds. Not probably the best way to grow carrots. But we've grown and learned a lot. And so one of the things we learned early on is that carrots have to have a good start. And a good start on our farm means a good clean seed bed. And the best way we know to do that is through some sort of fallow technique. Now there's multiple fallow techniques that we've used. We've used things like tarping. That's probably our favorite. And it's the most prevalent one on our farm. And by tarping, I mean putting out a solid black tarp that blocks all the light. And what that does, it encourages the weeds to germinate, and they pop up there underneath the tarp, and then they die. It's a very happy day for me. The second way we do this is sometimes we use a flame weeder, and we usually use that pre-emergent. So we'll seed the carrots into a bed that we've already tarped. So we've already knocked out a lot of the weed seeds, but inevitably there's going to be some weeds that are going to keep coming. And so what we'll do is when we know that the carrot seeds are about to pop up, which is, depending on the year or the time of the year, sometime between 5 and 14 days out, the best way to gauge that is to plant beets in the same bed at the same time. And when the beets pop up, you flame, because the carrots will just be a day or two behind the beets. But anyway, we use that a lot. And so what we'll do is we'll seed the carrots, we'll water them, we'll get the germination process started, and because carrots are kind of slow to germinate, there will be a bunch of weeds that come up before the carrots do. And if you want to kind of refine that technique a little bit, you can even prepare the bed, get everything ready, water it once, wait a couple of days, and if you got good weather for it, you wait a couple of days and then seed, and that gives the weeds an even bigger head start, so they're even more weeds germinated by the time you're ready to flame, which is, like I say, hopefully 1 or 2 days before the carrots emerge. And we've had really clean beds doing that when we hit it. I'm not going to pretend we're so diligent as to hit it every time, but when we do it well, it works really well. The other thing we'll see, and in this beds that we're digging from today, we've actually used our steam machine. And this is a pretty new innovation on our farm, something the Canadians have been doing for decades. But that's pretty sophisticated technology, high dollar stuff. But it is really, really effective for us. And what that's meant is almost completely weed-free beds, which is pretty cool. And so so they've got carrots to do that. Anyway, so starting with a clean seedbed is one thing. Early on, the way we did that was with pre-emergent tillage. So we would do, or post-emergent tillage, I mean. So we would prep the bed, let the weeds germinate, and then go through with a super light tiller. Something like 1/2 inch to 1 inch, as little as we could basically till, and just churn that top inch or 1/2 inch. And that works pretty well. The problem is the weather has to cooperate perfectly for that to work. You have to have enough moisture to get everything to germinate, and then have it be dry enough that you can run the tiller through it once, and then you seed, and now you've got a pretty good head start on the weeds. Whatever the case, getting a head start on the weeds is really key on carrots. So, and you can see some pictures of our carrots emerging here. We've used, in this particular case, the video I'm showing you, it's in some beds that have been tarped. So those beds were tarped over the winter, and we just seeded them a couple weeks ago. Now these carrots are emerging, and they're looking really clean. We're super happy with those beds, and that's what we'd like to see, because if we can get a good clean start on the carrots, then we're 10 steps ahead. Now going forward, what we'll do is as soon as we start to see some weeds popping up, we'll hit them with a wheel hoe. We find that to be a really effective tool, and we can get through and eliminate 99% of the weeds in a big hurry. And then oftentimes that'll be enough. It depends on how much weed pressure is in the bed. If we've done a good job cleaning the bed, a wheel hoe once or maybe twice will be enough to get all the between row weeds. And if there's a few weeds in row, we can live with that as long as they're not anything dominant. And then sometimes we do end up hand weeding the carrots. And we consider when we're hand weeding the carrots, we figure something has gone wrong. Still doesn't mean, it means sometimes we still end up doing it, because if we want carrots, sometimes that's the price we have to pay. But I'll also say that we've tilled under a lot of beds of carrots or tarped them over the years, because if they're weedy enough, we just don't think it's worth it. That's a lot of hand labor, and it takes the profit right out of the carrots. So anyway, that's growing the carrots initially. Also, carrots love water. They need lots of water. They need it regularly. You can see these sprinklers that we're using. We set up sprinklers, and when we're germinating carrots, we want them on a timer so that the soil surface will stay wet the whole time. We'll also put row cover over the top to help them germinate. And then as the carrots are growing, you don't want carrots to dry out. If carrots start to get dry soil, it causes stress to the plant, which will really mess with your, it'll mess with the roots. They'll branch out. They'll do all sorts of funky things that you don't want to see in your carrots. So, so anyway, constant or at least consistent water. And that's the biggest thing I know that I've learned in carrot growing more recently, was how much water they want and how consistently they want that. Of course, the deep friable soil helps a lot. Lots and lots of compost over the years has gotten us to that point. And then we'll also broad fork. If we have any doubt about how loose and friable a bed is, we'll broad fork before we do carrots. It's one of those crops that I think always pays to broad fork, because if you want long, beautiful, fat carrots, that's pretty much how you're going to get there. And then last thing, if you get to that point, you've got carrots that have popped up, they're germinated, now you've kept them weed free, and you've kept them well watered, now you're going to have beautiful carrots. Well, how are you going to harvest those? So we used to do what everybody does, which is use a fork, digging fork, and that's a great way to start. Of course, it works perfectly, but it's a lot of labor. And then we moved to using a Johnny's broad fork. Johnny's makes some great harvest tools. The broad fork they actually use a harvest fork, which is one of them. We found in our soils, oftentimes it was challenging to get that fork in the ground, but when you could, it was a fairly reasonably fast harvest technique, but it's still so much faster to use our undercutter. And so undercutters are a pretty standard thing on most of the reasonable sized market farms anymore. I'd say anything larger than an acre that has a tractor. An undercutter is a really cheap tool. We built ours for just a couple $100, and it saved us that much, the first 2 times we used it. So we can undercut a 100-foot long 5-row bed of carrots in about 2.5 minutes. I mean, it takes me a lot longer to hook the tractor implement up than it does to undercut the carrots. And then, and when you compare that to the effort it would take to, dig with a fork, it's just not even, it's a 1/10 of the time. So it really saves us a lot of time. Not even a 1/10 of the time. Boy, it's got to be, 2 minutes compared to probably 2 hours of forking on a 100-foot bed. So not to mention, of course, the physical effort. We got enough hard jobs on the farm without intentionally seeking out harder ones. So anyway, we really like that. It's a good, great tool for us. And while I'm mentioning great tools, I'll put in a plug for the tractor. I love our little tractor, Ford 1710. It's a little 3-cylinder, 27 horsepower, diesel, 4-wheel drive. We got a front loader. It's a wonderful little tractor. Ours is pretty old. I think it's 91, which by tractor standards isn't really that old, but it's definitely got some age on it, and it still performs beautifully. Really light on diesel, you know, sips the diesel, and just almost always, about 99% of the time, has enough power to do what we want to do. So we love that little tractor as well. Anyway, so we use the undercutter. That's what we're kind of focused on today. We slice under them with the undercutter, and then we're able to pull them out by hand. And you'll notice that some of them we're pulling out and leaving the tops on. Others we're pulling out and topping. So we have a barrel root washer, which we use to wash, and we'll get into that another time when we talk about pack and wash. But the barrel root washer does not work with tops. You have to take the tops off, and it's worth it. It actually saves us enough time that it offsets the loss of the tops in terms of sales numbers to make sense. But it is that's why we have to crack the tops off, because we can't send that through the barrel washer. So that's the story of carrots on Millsap Farm. I was going to say that I want to include this in all videos going forward. I want to share, you know, at least one of the many mistakes we've made over the years. But you know, the biggest mistake we've made with carrots over the years was not taking weed control seriously enough. And it took me a number of times of having some really weedy carrot beds that snuck up on us. And so here's the mistake part is, there have been many times when our carrots have started out fairly clean, like we actually did a good job controlling the weeds, and then in the last few weeks those weeds took over. And so the lesson there that we've learned is there's really never a time to stop being vigilant about carrot weeding if you want really high quality carrots, because the other thing that's happening in those last several weeks is most of your root size and weight is happening in those last 3 weeks. It's a dramatic difference between, you know, I guess that would be like between week 7 and week 10 of carrot growing. That's when most of the bulk is coming on. So it's really important to keep them well watered and to keep them well weeded. And then they pay, you know, because I don't know what your markets will bear for carrots, but our carrots are selling for $5 a pound. That makes a bed out in the field, which we're typically getting between 200 and 300 pounds of carrots out of a bed. So that's a $1,500, you know, a $1,000 to $1,500 harvest of carrots out of a 100-foot long, 3-foot wide bed. That's a good dollars per square foot number. And as long as we can keep our labor costs down and not have to weed them too many times, it's well worth doing, because we do, you know, we keep some track of that, and we have figured out that carrots are in the top, certainly the top 5 of profitable crops we grow, largely because of that high dollar price. But they are super high quality carrots, and I will stand by that $5 a pound price at any market. They are a fabulous product, very, very different than anything anybody can get in the grocery stores. And so I think that's a reasonable price for those. Anyway, so that's a little bit about carrots on the farm. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, push the like button, tell your friends about us. We're excited to share what we're doing here on Millsap Farm, both the things we've learned from experience by making the mistakes, and then hopefully some of the positive things that we've learned over the time that help us now do the job better. And leave comments if you have something you want to say, and we'll try and get back with you. Thank you.